Okay, so our word today. The word is illusion with an A. All right, an illusion is a lot like a reference, but it's a little bit different. Does anyone know the way that an illusion is different from a reference? All right, just checking where we are. So an illusion is like a reference to something. You reference that is not directly explained. So it's like something that the writer will call something to mind, some outside text or some outside event or person. They'll call it to mind without explicitly stating the thing or explicitly stating who that person was or what that event was. Like they might name it, but they're not going to say, and here's what you need to know about that person. So for example, well, don't write this example down, just as an explanation. If I were to say, just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, I am walking down a yellow brick road to my dreams, or whatever. That would be a reference because I'm saying, just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, here is a yellow brick road. Like I am very kind of like explicitly referencing the thing, right? But an illusion would be like, I'm going down the yellow brick road to my dreams and not even saying where that came from. The allusion is to Wizard of Oz, and I'm just sort of assuming that my audience knows what that is. Okay, so let's look at an illusion. Oh yeah, Eli.
So if there's like an adjective that's like based on like a writer or something, like if I call somebody Machiavellian to describe it, is that like also an illusion?
Yes.
Like,
exactly, yeah. Or Orwellian, but you're not saying like, just like how in, The Prince, Machiavelli describes this thing, you're just saying Machiavellian. Yep, perfect. Okay, let's look at Scarlet Letter now. So hopefully you brought your books, because how many of you got my remind about bringing your book? All right, if you're not getting my reminds, we need to make sure that you're signed up for the remind and that it's actually going to your phone. So if you didn't get my remind that said to bring Scarlet Letter, I think though I said like, bring it to show me your annotations on. So maybe if you didn't, that's not a huge deal. Here's what we'll do. If you have your own copy of Scarlet Letter, pull it up. If not, I've got it actually. This next time that you can have them now. These packets go in your 3-ring binder. They have all of our readings for the first unit, which is going to be about transcendentalism. The parts we're going to be looking at in Scarlet Letter are actually in this. So. Feel free to look through that. It is yours. You can write all over it. You can doodle on it. You can do whatever you want to this packet, except for lose it. All right, if you have your copy of Scarlet Letter, you can just open up to the first chapter, The Prison Door, for our example. If you don't have your copy though, I printed it in this. I haven't proofread these. I need to make sure it's actually in here. Yep, just the very first page says The Prison Door in our packets. I'll open there. And there are a lot of illusions in Scarlet Letter. It's one of the things that makes Scarlet Letter a little bit difficult to read. I think it's fair to say Scarlet Letter is a lot bit difficult to read. And part of it is because there's so many illusions that you're just sort of expected to understand. And if you had a great copy, you might have the notes in the back that give you all the information. But if you had like an Amazon copy, like they usually skip the notes, or sometimes the Signet copy skip the notes. So sometimes you have easy access to it, and sometimes you have to do all this outside research. But one of the illusions in this very first chapter is in the last paragraph. So you don't need to copy anything yet. Let me just read what it says. This rose bush, by a strange chance, has been kept alive in history, but whether it had merely survived out of the stern old wilderness so long after the fall of the gigantic pines and oaks that originally overshadowed it, or whether, as there is fair authority for believing, it had sprung up under the footsteps of the sainted Anne Hutchinson as she entered the prison door, we shall not take upon us to determine. And this book just expects you to understand who Anne Hutchinson is, why she has relevance in Puritan times, why she has relevance in this chapter at all. Does anyone know who Anne Hutchinson was? Okay, cool. So you can either use your Chromebooks or you can use your phone, but you're going to look up who Anne Hutchinson is right now. Katie?
She was banished to Rhode Island.
She was.
And antinomianism.
Yeah, so look up antinomianism.
That says,
Good.
the doctrine that man's soul could not be saved through his good deeds, but required God's grace.
Great. Okay, keep looking her up, because we're going to find even more in detail than that. So, banished to Rhode Island. God forbid. I think Rhode Island seems very nice, but Anne Hutchinson did not want to go there. Banished to Rhode Island for preaching antinomian. What?
That's why you, whenever it's like you're talking to someone, like trying to get banished somewhere, you're always like, oh, I don't want to go somewhere. You really want to go there. Yeah. You're like, oh, we're going to send them to this.
It was a
place.
trick. It was a trick. It was like,
Oh.
banish me to Paris. Yeah, I get it. Banished to Rhode Island for preaching antinomianism. And what was it again, Katie?
The doctrine that man's soul could not be saved through good deeds, but required God's grace.
Good. All right, anything else you guys are finding out about Anne Hutchinson? As you're Googling, it's worth a Google. All right, what do the Puritans hate about Anne Hutchinson so much, based on what you're reading so far? I see people on their phones, so I hope I'm not looking at Anne Hutchinson. Here's what I'll have you do. Pair up with the person next to you. So these two rows, these two rows, these two rows, and Sophia, pair in this like trio, and then you two and you two. Okay, so between you two, I'm hoping one of you at least remembered your Chromebook or has a phone that connects. I want you to look up some information about Anne Hutchinson and have one thing in your partnership that you can tell me to add to the board about who she is.
Hutchinson was brought to trial for like sorry the fathers, wealth and property, defending authorized.
All right, you got some stuff to tell me? Looks like it. Okay, now tell me, what's some stuff about Anne Hutchinson that we need to know? Yeah, Jack.
She was a key figure in religious freedom in the colonies.
All right, awesome. Represents religious freedom. Wow, that says represents. And then Maddie, did you have one too?
She was tried and excommunicated for campaigning the rights of
Yes. Excommunicated, and she's kind of she was tried for like insisting on rights of women. All right, wait, JJ.
Yeah.
Okay.
She challenged male authority and indirectly acceptable gender roles by preaching to both women and men by questioning Puritan teachings about salvation.
Yeah. Question the teachings of the, the community that she's living in. Question Puritan teachings, and it was upsetting because she was challenging male authority when she was preaching. In Puritan culture, if you were a woman, you were really only allowed to talk about that stuff with other women, but there were men in the congregation too, and that was a problem. Madeline, right?
She was considered a spiritual advisor.
She was considered a spiritual advisor. Oh yeah, to the people in the community, right? Yeah. So it wasn't just that she preached once and people were like, hey, you're not supposed to do that, you're excommunicated. It was that people were going to her with their questions about spiritual matters, and that was a huge problem. Dash?
So it says that she and some of her supporters established a settlement of Portsmouth.
Yes, cool. So she went to banished to Rhode Island. People followed her, and they established a community there. Colony there. Yeah, cool. So she's kind of responsible for Rhode Island being its own little separate state. All right, important woman. She's pretty famous. There is a transcript, if you are interested in her, there's a transcript of her trial. And so you get to read about, all of these like old Puritan guys are sort of, it's a lot, it reminds me a lot of Joan of Arc, but it's like all these old Puritan guys are sort of surrounding her and saying like, how dare you do this thing? And she is like very bold. She's just, well, I'm right is why I did the thing. It's because I am, I have the authority of God. So do what you're going to do, but I'm not changing my mind. I don't feel guilty. And then they banish her to Rhode Island. So let's look at the text then. It says that there is this rose bush outside of the prison door. And it says, whether it had sprung up under the footsteps of the sainted Anne Hutchinson. So based on the way that allusion is worded, this is the allusion right there. What can we assume, or what inferences, that's the word we were using last time, what inferences can we make about the way that this book views Anne Hutchinson? Yeah, Kaylee. In a good way, for sure. What makes you think that it's a good way here?
Bad vibes, I guess.
Yeah.
And then it talks about how like this rose stand out because it's the opposite of everything else.
Yes. Bad vibe prison. Yeah, awesome. So if the rosebush comes about because of Anne Hutchinson, and that means that the rosebush is the opposite of the prison, then Anne Hutchinson kind of represents something that is opposite of the prison. So we have these really good feelings about her here. Okay, what else kind of lets us know that he feels positively about Anne Hutchinson? And it might be totally obvious, but still call it out. Yeah, exactly. We've got sainted here. Okay, would the Puritans think she was sainted? Absolutely not. The Puritans thought like legitimately she was of the devil. In the trial, they accuse her of being influenced by the devil. So opposite of sainted. But here's Hawthorne calling her sainted. So that kind of gives us a clue about how we are supposed to read sin in the novel, how we're supposed to read women in the novel, and challenging the status quo, or challenging authority in the novel. So what would you say is like already the kind of argument about like challenging authority that he creates through this illusion? I'll say that again because I said a lot. What do you think the argument he is making? What do you think? What argument is Hawthorne making by alluding to Anne Hutchinson right up front like this in this way? Awesome. Okay, cool. Like Anne Hutchinson, if you want to be a saint like her, Challenge authority. How about the feminist intention of the book? Because sometimes I had you write about gender, you know, maybe feminist is too strong a word, but let's talk about gender equality. The gender equality of the book. How are we kind of primed right from the beginning to read that? If Anne Hutchinson is sainted. Yeah, Kaylee.
Kind of makes me want to hear, like, I don't want an audience to be just like
Awesome. So he wants us here to associate Esther with Anne Hutchinson and therefore see her as unfairly treated. The way it kind of seems like he sees Anne Hutchinson as unfairly treated. So you can do a lot with an allusion in a book. And like I said, that is a part of what makes Scarlet Letter really hard to read, is that there's so many allusions in the book. But if you look up what some of these people are, you can pull so much from it. So on the word of the day sheet, we still need to do synonyms, antonyms, and use it in a sentence, right? All right, so what's a synonym then? After all of this, what's a synonym just for allusion? What's another word that means somewhat the same thing? Yeah. Yeah, a mention. That is a good one. Gavin, did you have one? Oh. Let's do one more. Yeah, Jeff.
Reference.
A reference works really well. Yeah. Reference, just not direct. Yeah. Wide reference. All right, cool. Then what's the opposite of an allusion? I don't know. That one's kind of dumb. The opposite of allusion would be like no allusion. So I'll skip that unless you can think of a better one. I mean, it might be reference. Yeah.
Exposition. Like you're alluding to it without really saying it, but exposition is like you explain everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to steal that for my next class. No, I'll tell them you said it. Exposition is perfect. Because if that's a direct explanation, then yeah, an allusion is not direct. Cool. And then when you use it in a sentence, I want you actually to just write that sentence. You're not using allusion in a sentence, you're just demonstrating a sentence with what an allusion is. It sprung up on the footsteps. It had sprung up under the footsteps of the sainted Anne Hutchinson. Bless you. Okay, while you're finishing that up, and you can put it away when you're done, I want to talk a little bit about the prompts that we did. So one of the ways that I approach difficult texts, and there are definitely texts that are still super difficult for me, is doing outside research like that. If they mention a name that I don't understand or a concept that I don't understand, I will maybe circle it to come back to later, but I might even pause to get the information on that outside subject so that I can go into the rest of the text feeling a little bit more secure in my knowledge. And that usually I have to do that at the beginning a lot more than I have to do at the end, because books kind of teach us how to read them. Kind of like how video games teach us how to play them, books will teach us how to read them as we go. But that's one of my tricks. I want to hear about what you guys do. When you are approached, like you have to read a hard text, or you want to because you're trying to challenge yourself. What are some tricks that you do to help you understand that text? Yeah, Kaylee? That's such an awesome idea, because within each paragraph, there's usually going to be one sentence that as you're skimming it kind of stands out and helps you understand it. And then once you have that understanding and you can go back, you can apply all the difficult parts to that understanding. So that makes sense to me. I will reread things over and over again to try to like not only get just a basic understanding, but to do that close reading. Yeah, Rachel.
I'll go to a sense that I don't understand, find all the words I do know. And once I get an idea of, oh, it's talking about this, then I can kind of say, oh, yeah, kind of going along like that. If I know what this word means,
Yeah.
I get through the whole stuff.
So it kind of like gives you context clues just in that sentence itself. That makes sense to me. Eli?
I'll find like a passage that seems easier, like kind of grabs my attention. Just read that so I can like, get used to the text. Kind of get into it.
Yeah. Sometimes does that mean that you're not reading in order then?
Yeah, just like so I can like figure out how it's set up so I can actually understand it.
That makes sense to me. I do that especially with philosophy. If I find like really short paragraphs in something that's really dense, I'll read that to try and figure it out before reading any of the rest of it. Somehow that helps me too. Okay, I know a lot of you started to listen, like you read this at first and then you started to listen to it on audio, right? Why does audio help? Maggie?
It just tells the story better. I think just my opinion, I'd rather listen. It helps me. I don't know when I read, so.
Yes. Okay, cool. So like part of the reading of difficult text is like it is really tempting us to not pay attention, because if your brain has to work that hard, your brain just wants to be released from that, right? So the audio you're saying really helps you pay attention. That's cool. Josh?
Sometimes like when I'm reading the book, I'll like not understand what it's talking about. When I listen to the audiobook, I'll realize like I know what it's talking about. It's just I didn't realize that was how you spell the word, or that's like a different spelling of the word.
Uh-huh.
So when I actually hear it, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
So it actually helps with reading comprehension. And while you do that, are you reading along with it too?
Yeah, I do that.
Oh, okay, got it. Keegan?
When I read, my mind wanders like a lot. And so when I hear it, I can like picture the story better. It's like kind of watching the movie more than reading.
Oh,
like,
okay.
I can hear it and picture it, like, and it's not so much work.
Yeah. Okay. So it is more like about the comprehension part of it, right? And if someone's doing that part kind of for you, it leaves your brain to do more of what's enjoyable about reading, which is the like picturing and the paying attention to plot and stuff. JJ?
The way they say it. So like if you don't understand a passage, you could interpret it as a totally different emotion, like be harder to understand a paragraph. But
Yeah.
if someone says it and they know what it's trying to say, it could like tie it.
Absolutely. Like, especially if you've got a good actor doing it. That's why I always would prefer to watch a Shakespeare play first instead of reading it first, because it's so much easier to understand when you see the voice, not only the voice, but also paired to the actions too. Katie?
Just like the same thing as the audiobooks. I don't like audiobooks for several reasons, but like when I can read it, like reading it out loud, like being a kid, like came out. Then it's like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, I will read things out loud to myself all the time too. If you ever stumble into this classroom, you might see me talking to myself, and it's because for whatever reason, speaking something helps solidify it for me. Anyone watch if you know there's a movie adaptation, you watch that first and then go to the book if you're having a hard time? I've done that before with Shakespeare too. You've done that maybe?
Well, yeah, it was kind of on accident though. I thought it was really well. I was like, hey, you should read the book. Doesn't the book be all?
Oh, cool. So it actually like the movie was complicated and the book cleared it up?
Yeah, and also like the book has stuff from the second one that in the first book they don't explain that, and so like I have more context for that.
Yeah, and I feel like it works the other way too. Sometimes if I watch the movie first, I feel like I have more context, kind of like with what JJ was saying. It's like and Keegan, I already have a visual image for the thing they're trying to say. That doesn't work with nonfiction so much, like some of the essays I'm going to make you read, but that definitely works for fiction for me. All right, so one trick though that I will use that is a very teachery trick, but still helps, is if this is similar to what Eli was saying, I think. If I'm having a hard time, I need to like get into the mind of the writer and see his style and figure out his style. And one way to do that is through close reading itself. So we're gonna look at the very first sentence of this book. You have it written in that packet that I gave you. So everyone, even if you have the book with you, open the packet. We're gonna write all over it. All right, now with the same people you were working with before, I want you to find 3 interesting things to say about how this sentence is worded. So it's just the very first sentence of the prison door. You're going to talk to each other, and together you're going to find 3 interesting things, and you're going to actually write them in the packet, right around the sentence. You're going to connect them, and you're going to say, okay, let's say I think that it's interesting that these men are bearded. I'm going to do this. I'm going to like draw a little line, and I'm going to write why that's interesting that they are bearded. And you're going to do that with 3 different things. So it's basically just annotating that this one sentence. All right, talk together, decide which 3 things you're going to annotate.
I think the first one. I don't know.
All right. I think something else is happening.
Just a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's like a scary stuff.
It says sad colors on it. It says sad color. That's pretty weird.
And grace. Grace.
Steeple crown, gray steeple crown hats.
Yeah, so just like look,
What they use that?
yeah. So it's like,
Yes.
yeah.
The door.
Oh, I see.
What is? It's a large.
All right, some of you are already ahead of me, but you're going to choose the observation now that you feel like has the most promise for understanding what this book is all about, and you are going to look up the definition of that word. So I just did it for gray, and I know what I thought I knew what gray meant. You know, it's the mixture between black and white, gray. But when you Google gray definition, we get of a color intermediate between black and white. That's what I thought. But then it says as of ashes or lead. Okay, that's an interesting connotation. Cloudy and dull, a person having gray hair, relating to old people collectively, related to a person's face, pale as through tiredness, age, or illness. It goes on. There's like 20 definitions of gray when I look up gray definition. And as I'm like looking through all those definitions, I'm like, ooh, I could apply something about paleness here. I could think about how this is representative of age and like a crowd of old people. And I could like start to think about all the different ways to think about this word. So choose your observation that you think has the most promise, and then Google that word definition and add to your notes in the margins. I'll show you how I'm going to do it.
Sad colors. That would not be a definition.
I don't know.
Definition of sad. Oh, look at that. It gives the example of somber or sober humor. Nice. Well, that was pretty scary.
So it's the same as like here, but it's like. Okay, that's not what I wanted.
Matter.
Okay, then what other one? Hurry. Wait, no. So not goods, but
All right, as a model, look at how much I was able to say about gray. Keep working if you don't have that much said yet. And you're working with your partner on stuff you can add. Think about connotations and what it's associated with.
Yeah.
gangsta.
I'm younger.
Yeah, it's kind of like thin piece of metal, like prong, barb, skewer, tail.
I should get
Full study on the I don't know. Sad.
All right, I'm gonna cut you off now. Okay, I just want to show you what I was doing with gray. So I was looking at the definitions of the word, and then I was thinking about all the implications that might have kind of in this novel. So I started with that idea that it's between white and black, and I was like, oh, gray is like not fully one thing or the other then. It's this kind of intermediate color. Intermediate is the word that the dictionary used. And because of that, I'm thinking about how it feels like they are kind of in the middle of something, not secure in one point of view or the other. And potentially, I haven't written this down, but potentially that could have something to do with Hester, like upsetting the status quo. That just this word gray, I know I'm making a lot of leaps here. I'm not saying that Hawthorne intended any of this. I'm just like brainstorming. So I'm kind of thinking about like why they would be between one and the other. Then I'm thinking about like it's related to old people. I was very inspired by this idea that we might associate old people by their gray hair, and they're wearing gray hats. So it's just this like sea of gray, the guy. And it says that gray, old people, I was thinking more about like the connotations of like the elderly. And I was like, okay, they're associated with like tradition, you know, like traditional values. They're associated with like maintaining the status quo. I went over here, this gets a little dark, but I'm like, they're at the end of their life. So they're kind of at the end of possibilities for their life. They're, you know, at least further from it than you guys are. They're kind of like, we always say like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's like they've kind of like done their growing and maturing, and now they are there and they aren't really looking for new ways to change. So that's a lot of gray stuff. I've got this idea that it's nondescript, meaning like everything, it kind of like fits in. Gray is like kind of like a, well, it's even associated with boredom. It's kind of like a boring color. I like it, but it's like if you want to fit in, wear gray type of a thing. I also looked at this and it said it was associated with ashes and lead. And so I was like, okay, ashes, it's kind of like a kind of idea of death. And I started thinking about how these two might connect, old people and death. And then the lead idea, it was like lead, you can't change lead. It's a super hard substance. So I used the word intractability, which just means like you can't change it. Okay, so I'm just like brainstorming. I am not by any means saying when Hawthorne said that they were wearing gray hats, that this is what he was trying to convey to all of us. But when I'm reading a difficult text, it really helps me to just pick apart the first sentence to get an idea of where he might be going with it. So tell me your observations. Let's just, whatever word you want to start with. Which word did you find very interesting? Yeah, Sophia.
We used spikes.
Okay, awesome.
And a lot of the definitions, one of it said like it had rigid material, so we went on about how it's like strict and it's like a strict society. And then if there was this one, it says a sharp increase in magnitude or concentration of something. So we kind of did that as it like draws attention.
Yeah.
And then it says like pierced with a sharp point, which gives it kind of like negative connotation with, you know, what's going on. Trying to keep something in.
Yeah.
And just reaching a peak, which we talked about, like the peak of just kind of like a climax just because of what's going on. Awesome. And stuff it would because it's like
awesome. That's an excellent way of applying these skills here. Okay, I also want to think about this idea of pierced with a sharp point, keep something in. You were like, that obviously gives it a negative connotation, right? It also gives it a really violent connotation. Like our prison doors don't have spikes on them. They are not like, that reminds me of like Matilda in the Trench Bowl. Remember that like closet that she has with the spikes? Like it's terrifying. Like the word spike to me is associated with torture devices. Yeah, Keegan.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about how like he added the iron spikes. Like it's kind of unnecessary. Like it's just for like the dramatic effect of like the person.
Yeah, for sure. Dramatic effect. Now, they decide not to kill Hester. They're not going to execute Hester. She has a baby. That would probably not look great for the community to you know, do something super violent. But is what happens to Hester a kind of violence? Could we think of it as violence? Tell me how. Yeah, Sophia.
I would consider it kind of like a sense of torture.
Yeah, okay, cool. So the public humiliation,
very mentally draining,
is like torture. And is the reason that it's like torture because it's mentally draining?
Yeah, it's mentally draining and just like causing her to feel like guilt and all these things that they're trying to like force upon her.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I always go so dark, but I guess I just have a dark mind. But like, let's say you're in this position. You've done something wrong in your community. They're going to punish you. They can either punish you physically, physical torture. I don't know. Won't leave a mark forever. It's going to hurt. I don't know. I won't get in details. Or they're going to punish you with mental torture, but that one's going to last your whole lifetime, like the A. Which one are you going to take? Like, you have to choose one. Fun scenario. Fun scenario for 11:35 in the morning on the second day of school. I would choose the physical. I don't know about you. I would choose the physical. Get it over with, and then I don't have to suffer for the rest of my life. Like, yeah, it's going to be humiliating in that moment. Yes, it's going to hurt. But then, like, if everyone's like, yeah, and then once that happens, you're good. You're going to be part of society again. Like, I would choose that one. Yeah, I'd rather be punched in the face than cyberbullied. That's kind of what I'm going with for. Like, I think I could handle that more. And part of that for me is because the violence that's happening here is this idea. Spikes are like to keep people out. They are going to like get into you, right? They're going to like the guilt does of her community. It's going to kind of like worm its way into her kind of heart and her brain and her soul. And it's going to be not only like other people punishing her at that point, it's going to be herself punishing her. So I think that's part of why it uses spikes, is to get at that idea of like violence. All right, tell me about another word in here. Oh no, did I say something dumb? Okay, tell me about another word. I know you guys were talking about it. Everybody was just talking about spikes. Yeah, yeah, Xavier. Okay, cool. Where's edifice?
On the fourth line.
There it is. All right. What does edifice mean?
It's a large building that's like imposing.
Awesome. That was too fast. All right. What else did you guys notice about edifice? Or was it just you working on it?
Another definition is a complex system of belief.
Awesome. I really like that it means both of these things, that we're going to associate, we're going to make a metaphor for a complex system of belief through this large imposing building. So tell me about why it's important that there is a giant wooden edifice that kind of announces the presence of a prison. The prison itself is the giant wooden edifice. Sorry, I said that wrong. Haley? Yeah, you can't ignore it. This prison is like smack dab in the middle of this community. It talks about how like when a community starts, no matter how idealistic you want it to be, you have to have a prison there. So it's this like thing that is sticking out and that you cannot avoid at all, right? And I also think it's really interesting about this system of belief, because to me it seems like that prison is upholding the system of belief. Without the prison, Puritan belief might crumble as people start to kind of peck at it and say, well, I don't know about this. I don't know that I believe in this thing. It's going to start to fall apart. So you have the giant edifice to keep it intact. Okay, one more before we go for pictures. Did anyone talk about throng? Yeah, Dash. Okay.
So it basically means it's like a large, densely packed group of people.
Okay. What are some words that are synonymous with throng? Oh, yeah, did you tumult? What does tumult mean? It's like tumultuous.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's like a lot at once.
Yes, good. It's not just like it's at once. I like that. A lot at once. It's like chaotic. If something is tumultuous, it's like hard to like figure out what's going on. So you've got this throng of bearded men in sad colored garments and gray steeple crowned hats. Let's talk about that. Those men first. Yeah.
Okay, another thing about throng.
Yeah.
Press my works one's way.
Awesome. So you've got this giant like mob basically of old guys watching this woman come out of the prison. And then on the other side, you've got intermixed with women, some wearing hoods and others bareheaded, who are assembled in front of the prison. Tell me about that crowd. Like, why do you think he doesn't just say a throng of people? Why does he have to like say there's both men and there's women there? Yeah. Absolutely. You have to say that these are different because we're going to treat them differently. So there are men there and there are women, but they all make up the throng. All right, I'm looking at the first sentence of this. I would not write all this down when I am close reading and I am trying to like learn how to read this book, but I would pause and I would take a second and I'd try and figure out what kind of topics are already starting to emerge. And if I've got all of this, then reading the rest of that prison door chapter becomes a lot clearer. So we're going to try and do that, but we're going to go down and get pictures first. So we're going down to the tech atrium. You can just leave your stuff in here because I'll lock the door and we'll be back. The tech tech atrium. We're gonna go bottom stairs, turn left. And then there's lines for the pictures, and just get into whatever line looks shortest. And if they tell you to move, then you can move, because there's one line that's taking forever, and we'll hopefully avoid that. All right. They're going to give you your student ID for this. So I don't think yeah, but I don't think you need the ID going into it. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, but after you get your picture taken, you're gonna stand there and they're gonna give it to you right then.
Oh my gosh, Maddie. What do you do? Whoa.
Do you have a different English class?
I have creative writing first period.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's a great class.
You're trying to annoy her. She's like, oh. Feel good about yourself. You're like, no, do it at the same time. I swear, I've like never seen that or like angry. So thought you already get teachers too? No.
All right, Matt, I am not gonna lock the door. We'll just slowly come back.
Yeah. She locked the door, but the door wasn't closed, so it doesn't really matter.
What can you do with the old student IDs? That's the question. Just keep her up there, I guess. I was thinking something like a collage or put in them. Those are the only two options. Either public art or first year. 11 years. 11 years. I don't have them on my license. It's better than my driver license photo. Yeah. Yeah. My driver's license was a little bit off. It looks. Oh, and it looks. Oh, oh, the daybreak card. Well, I mean, I can't imagine why. It doesn't look bad. You have the dark, creepy hallway in the back, so I kind of goes ruin it. Oh. So do I destroy it? Do I slash it up? Do I just burn it? I think something else. Yeah, this is. Look at that. There's like hair piled on top. It's not my fault. 20 minutes. I know, I did this. Well, everyone did because it's just a random day. I don't know if I have my phone. No, because I sent it to a friend and then I was like, just in my phone. Well, this looks awful. Second, I don't know. Inbox. $30 over. Dude, it's Target for. Yeah, dude, it's Target. It was like $2. Oh, I did. I'm sure you did. You just zoom out. But his is just so. Everything is different colors. You got like this is one shred. They all have like the same colors. That one's all gray roots. Well, that's not all a shred. This is all like outside. This is it's just like dang, Gina! Only 1,000 photos. I have like 20. I also have a tiny one.
You're so mean.
Did you blink right before?
No. That's mean. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Get away from me, Gigi.
I'll take it.
Who's phone is ringing?
All I need is my
Tuesday. Let me see yours. I was like, no, yours first. Please. Okay. Wow. Oh, Miles.
He's even surprised. It's not that much shadow. I thought, we thought it might be shadow, but there's not that much shadow.
I'll try.
It's like, look at this. It's like a dumb piece.
All right, go ahead, take a seat. We got one more thing to do today. Go ahead, take a seat. Take a seat. Everybody happy with their pictures? All right, keep your packet open to that same page. We're going to extend what we've been doing to the rest of that little prison door chapter. All right, so I'm going to read bits of this, and then I'm going to pause, and I'm going to tell you what to comment on. And you can use the same techniques we were using when you were on your own with this sentence. You can look things up in the dictionary, you can do a little research, you can do whatever to help you understand it. So, paragraph 1. We already did paragraph 1. Okay, paragraph 2. So we read paragraph 1 is just this one sentence. Paragraph 2, you are going to be commenting on nouns. Nouns are people, places, or things, right? So you're going to be commenting on the nouns. So as I'm going to only give you a couple minutes to do this, I'll read it out loud and then give you a couple minutes. So you're just going to either focus a lot of attention on a couple nouns, or you're going to say a bunch of things about a bunch of different nouns, however you want to do it. All right, the founders of a new colony, whatever utopia of human virtue and happiness they might originally project, have invariably recognized it among their earliest practical necessities to allot a portion of the virgin soil as a cemetery, and another portion as the site of a prison. In accordance with this rule, it may safely be assumed that the forefathers of Boston had built the first prison house somewhere in the vicinity of Cornhill, almost as seasonably as they marked out the first burial ground on Isaac Johnson's lot, and round about his grave, which subsequently became the nucleus of all the congregated sepulchres in the old churchyard of King's Chapel. So, full of allusions. Might want to look up what sepulchres is. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to comment on the nouns in that little section, up until King's Chapel. I didn't clarify. You can do this alone or together, however you want to do it. That's how I say it. But I also say sherbert, so I'm not someone to trust. So you're writing in your book right there, right guys in the back, you're writing. Good, good. one more minute. Bless you. Okay, I'm cutting you off. We're going to move on now. So for this next part, you are looking for patterns in the images. So any kind of images that you feel like are starting to kind of repeat themselves in this section. So certain it is that some 15 or 20 years after the settlement of the town, the wooden jail was already marked with weather stains and other indications of age, which gave a yet darker aspect to its beetle brown and gloomy front. The rust on the ponderous ironwork of its oaken door looked more antique than anything else in the New World. Like all that pertains to crime, it seemed never to have known a youthful era. Before this ugly edifice, and between it and the wheel track of the street, was a grass plot, much overgrown with burdock, pigweed, apple peru, and such unsightly vegetation, which evidently found something congenial in the soil that had so early borne the black flower of civilized society, a prison. In that little section, you are looking for repetition in the imagery. So think back to even how we started, what seems to be repeating in the images in that section, and you're commenting in the sides. And again, you could do that together or by yourself, as long as you're writing stuff down. Oh, sorry. More seconds, but try and say as much as you can about those patterns. Okay, in this next section, there's a couple metaphors. And by metaphors, I just mean anything that couldn't be taken literally. So for example, it says that the month of June has, or the wild rose bush has delicate gems. It's talking about the flowers, but it's calling them gems. So that would be a metaphor because it's not totally literal. So some of them aren't as obvious as some of the metaphors that we're used to seeing, but there's a few in here. So you're going to be commenting on the metaphors in this next section. But on one side of the portal and rooted almost at the threshold was a wild rosebush covered in this month of June with its delicate gems, which might be imagined to offer their fragrance and fragile beauty to the prisoner as he went in, and to the condemned criminal as he came forth to his doom, in token that the deep heart of nature could pity and be kind to him. Okay, in that section, just comment on the metaphors. What do you think those metaphors are suggesting about either the tone of the book or the atmosphere or the themes? You could think about writing like, what are some qualities of a gem that seem important here? Or what are qualities of a deep heart or a portal? Okay, last little bit. This book has, this very first chapter has a bit of like a fairy tale feel to it. There's this kind of overgrown building with vines all up and down it, and there's this rose bush, and it's like, I'm gonna pluck a rose bush and give it to you. Like, it's almost like, kind of reminds me of like the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, weirdly. Like, I can imagine that same music playing over the beginning of this book. And the reason I'm telling you that is because it feels kind of like a moral tale, like the same way fairy tales are. By the end of it, you're supposed to get some kind of like moral lesson from it. So we're going to read this last paragraph, and you're going to comment on the moral of the story that it seems to be hinting at, or we could say also the argument that it is making in the beginning here. Does that make sense? Kinda? Okay, so you're just going to comment on whatever you can to find the argument. This rose bush, by a strange chance, has been kept alive in history, but whether it had merely survived out of the stern old wilderness so long after the fall of the gigantic pines and oaks that originally overshadowed it, or whether, as there is fair authority for believing, it had sprung up under the footsteps of the sainted Anne Hutchinson as she entered the prison door, we shall not take upon us to determine. Finding it so directly on the threshold of our narrative, which is now about to issue from that inauspicious portal, we could hardly do otherwise than pluck one of its flowers and present it to the reader. It may serve, let us hope, to symbolize some sweet moral blossom that may be found along the track, or relieve the darkening close of a tale of human frailty and sorrow. So, right in the sides, what kind of argument do you think the language is starting to make here, or what kind of moral to the story is there? You can think about it like, what do you think the moral of dwelling on the prison door is supposed to be? No wrong answers, just your thoughts. was it this class where people like specifically pointed out this prison door chapter as of an example where they were just like, it is excessively detailed. Like, why did we need a whole chapter on describing one door? Was that this class or was that the other class? Maybe the other class. But did any of you feel that way when you first started this? You're like, oh, I'm in for a real treat by reading this book based on this first chapter. It is excessively detailed for sure. But did you see when we kind of like took our time and really thought about the word choices and the way it's being presented to us? Did you pull out some more meaning from it than you originally did? Okay, some people, yes, some people are like, I just want this class to be done. Understandable. I think that it can be, your brain might hurt after doing all of that. It's excessive concentration, but that can help you when you're getting through these difficult texts. So we're going to keep practicing that. I don't think we have any homework even for next time. I think after next time is when we start all of that, but I think you are good. So are there any questions about class or anything? All right, cool.